Hello and welcome to another Overlord lore video, and today we are going to take a look at the strongest of frost dragons that Einzelgon has ever met, including who he is and why he is quite something special, even by dragon standards. But before we're going to take a look at him, let's take a look at my Patreons and thank them for supporting this channel. Also please check out my fantasy channel, link to it is down in the description. Furthermore, I say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function who made one-time donations. And with that said, let's start with Olasird's life, for the Frost Dragon was not only quite ambitious, but also pursued very well thought out long-term goals that would have taken decades if not centuries in order to come into fruition. And the best way to start explaining this Frost Dragon is by explaining how he met the mother of a couple of his children, Mauntins of Azalesia, because he fought for the heart of his now wife in quite a literal sense. Both dragons had a go at it, before they had a go at it, in the dwarf city of Feotivas, one of the now lost cities of the dwarves. And the reason for why it became lost is because their battle was so violent and catastrophic in nature that it completely devastated the entire city. And if you're now thinking that dragon mating is very violent, mate, do not ever Google how ducks mate. Now this fight and the equally rough love act that surely followed forced the dwarves to abandon yet another city because of the frost dragons, for Olasird had his dragon horde in the former capital city of the dwarven kingdom, Feobercana, where he had his horde after the dwarves had to evacuate the ruined city due to the attack of one of the evil deities 200 years ago. And all of this goes to show how old Oolasie really is. For given all of these circumstances, he must be at least in his 3rd century by now. Ample time to father not just one child with one wife, but over a dozen, 16 to be precise, with 3 separate wives. And once the Quagoan showed up to the dwarf city, now ruled by his kind, Olasird'arc actually allowed them to stay, in exchange for tribute, in the form of gold and treasures, effectively subjugating the Quagoa. And while Periuro was actually quite strong and clever enough to unite his tribe, and while he or the next Quagoan generation, nurtured by rare dwarven ores, might have eventually succeeded at overthrowing the dragons and kicking them out of the mountains, Oolasie didn't acknowledge the mole people as a threat. This is not to say that there is no threat to him, quite the contrary. The Frost Dragon wanted to rule the mountains ever since he was a little dragonling. But he saw how the mostly solitary lifestyle of his kind would fail them eventually. For the Frost Giant tribe, who could easily compete in terms of power with the Frost Dragons. And they were also much like Olasird'arc, resistant to cold attacks and thus immune to the dragon's icy breath. But the Frost Giants, in stark contrast to the Frost Dragons, also lived in social structures, thus uniting the strength of pretty much the entire kind into one single army if the need would ever arise. And this force was far too strong, even for the mighty Olasird'arc to take on. And therefore, he had chosen to build his own little Frost Dragon tribe and subjugate lesser species of the mountains, in order to form his own little empire. And all of this shows that even after wild magic had been taken from the somewhat younger dragon generation, that if it weren't for Eins and other players still coming to the new world, the dragons would be able to eventually replenish their numbers and regain their dominant position in the new world, only with them using and mastering Tyr instead of wild magic now. But despite Olasird'arc building his own little empire, he wasn't a little emperor, but he still heeded the advice of his 3 wives and the feedback of his children, except that of Henjimal, who he basically had given up upon. Olasird'arc valued strength and battle prowess above all else, for these qualities were vital in the upcoming conflict with the Frost Giant tribe, while Henjimal was just a shut-in bookworm, who was bad at doing battle and so obese that he would be often called the Dragon Pig. And for the warrior Olasird'arc, this was a disappointment, for he really did embody those qualities quite well. First and foremost, the Frost Dragon was level 46. Just for comparison, Gazav Stronov was level 29 at most, without his wild magic ring, and Clementine only in her 30s level-wise, and even a Death Knight who's at level 35 would be easily defeated by an enemy as strong as Olasir, and even Elder Liches, who are immune to cold attacks, thus rendering the freezing breath of the Dragonlord useless, could be easily crushed or smashed by the dragon's long, agile, and whip-like tail. There's a reason he has 3 wives after all. Jokes aside, even to the dreaded Fireball, the Elder Liches were capable of casting, as well as other fire-based magic. Olasir had an answer, or the dragon was able to cast tier magic up to the 3rd tier, which was still somewhat substandard for a being of level 46, and even Fluda's disciples were stronger casters than him, but it still sufficed to cast powerful spells on his very own, and Olasir learned an unnamed defensive spell that would render him highly resistant, if not completely immune, to fire-based damage for a time. Well, at least for the weaker types of fire magic, like Fireball and other type 3 tier magic. And before we come to his grave mistake, let's get over his stats, levels and classes. Olasir is pretty much dragon true and true, without any job classes. He merely leveled up his dragon-based classes of going through them by age, granting him pretty much the powers and abilities to be expected of a dragon. His most prominent stat is that of HP, for such a big dragon is hard to kill, and his attack and defense stat make him able to crush enemies fast, while being able to endure a great amount of punishment. His thick scales act as natural armor. His teeth are swords, his claws spears, his wings a hurricane, his breath quite cool, and his tail can work as an emergency key, if swung hard enough. But since dragons are natural magical creatures, Olasir is also a caster of the 3rd tier, although this magic is mainly used to augment his fighting style, and as a frost dragon immune to ice, he's also quite resistant, not only to frost-based damage, but also to the many other environmental hazards. And finally, his special ability likely represents his powerful breath weapon, which we sadly haven't seen, neither in the anime nor in the books, which is, now that I'm thinking about it, quite disappointing. But with all of this said, there's one great weakness that ultimately led to his downfall, his draconic avarice, for he was head over heel for Einsulgon's Gone. He wanted to possess the rare clothing of Eins so much that every other thought was cast aside, and even Heijenmal, the Hikikomori's son, was surprised how his father, a much better fighter than him, a dragon with centuries of knowledge, were unable to sense just how much of a danger Einsulgon is, because even he was able to do so. But by being used to focus on nothing but his own strength, his sense of superiority, the vast amount of tribute that the dragon would get, and by only acknowledging the strength of the Frost Giant tribe, Olasir failed to see the biggest danger right in front of him, and so he died, with his corpse serving as material for the production of scrolls and other items, and his dragons were ultimately subjugated, the very thing that he feared. But at least not by, but together with the Frost Giant tribe, and now his kind is serving as an airline equivalent for the Sorcerer Kingdom, while the Frost Giants were made to polish the statues of the Sorcerer King. And with the end of Olasir, this video will also be over, and I say thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Badger Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Duckwagon, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Thiralchivan, Guy with That Hat, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kylar, Legendarius, Lelouch Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Merovec, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Cunic Cos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Rock Warbos, Rag Edsmasher, T. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon under my next video.